Okay, let's double click the wind zone. Let's put it over here, which I don't really want. Let's bring it up. Move it across. There we go. Zoom, double click, and in we go. So now there's our first person controller, look. And what this is doing, similar to the light, this is currently a directional wind, which doesn't really matter where it is on the scene, it will blow in this direction, the way that the arrow's pointing. So if I press play now, then we should see a little bit of action on the trees. There we go, look. How cool is that? Now it's a little bit intense, but look, even the grass is being affected by the wind. Fantastic. Now, how about we change the type of wind zone that it is? You can change it from being a directional to a spherical. And that means that only the trees inside the sphere will be affected by the wind zone. And I can adjust the radius and the turbulence, which is the strength of the wind. I can even adjust the pulse and the pulse frequency of how often the wind blows. Now if I just move this over here so it's in the camera's view and press play, now only the trees within the wind zone will be affected, whereas other trees over there won't really be affected by the wind zone. Look, see, they're not moving. These guys are moving. And that's how you can create a kind of effect where you could walk on a hillside and suddenly the wind is blowing, or you could walk inside a house and suddenly all the wind stops. Now, if I'm unhappy, press escape and come out. If I'm unhappy about the speed that I'm walking around, I can change the speed to 15 and the run speed to about 30 and press play again. And now look at the speed I'm running around. Much faster. Although the sound effect needs a little bit of an adjustment. In fact, I normally turn the footstep sound off, which is down here. You just basically tick this and then change it to none, and you wouldn't have the footsteps. You can also adjust the run step length and things like that. So if I increase that, then I won't run around and make as much noise as frequently. Here we go. Not really that much difference in this particular case. But there you go, guys. That is how you can simply, very quickly create a 3D world, import trees, grass, mess with the terrain, and apply wind zones and a first-person controller to run around inside your world. Okay guys, so this is where we last left off. Now what I'm going to do next is show you how you can kind of add a few cool effects to our environment. Now if I scroll down a second, what I want to do is create an effect that it's either snowing or raining, depending where we are. Now to do that, I'm going to use something called particle systems. So come up to the assets and import a package called particle systems. Now this will import a bunch of things once more, but it will also include a bunch of prefabricated particle systems, things like smoke effects and different dust clouds and things like that. Now it adds that to the standard assets that we've already got imported. And now look, we have an additional folder for particle systems. Now inside particle systems, there's a prefabs folder. And inside that, we have got something called a dust storm and a dust storm for mobile. Now this particular version isn't for mobile. So I'm just going to drag out the dust storm and place it over here. Like so. And you can see, look, it actually generates an effect of a dust cloud. Now, if I press play now and walk around this little environment, you can see the particle effects, and suddenly we've got some environmental features to our cool little scene. Now, if I come out of this for a second, we'll just press escape. There we go. I'm just going to change the speed that I'm walking around, as it's kind of frustrating me about the double sound effect. How you can edit a particle effect. If you click on the dust storm here, look, we have in the inspector a bunch of objects and parameters. Now, you can play with this to your heart's content. One of the easiest things I want to show you is how you can change the start and the end color. So let's say that I wanted this to look more like smoke or fog going through the trees. Then I can simply change the start color and the end color to be a whiter color. And now look, it will give the effect that it's kind of a misty morning. And we're actually walking through fog. I can also move this particle system so that it appears only on top of like a mountain range, for example. And that will give the effect that clouds are actually moving through the mountain range like so. So let's have another quick look. If I just look left, look, how fantastic does this look? It's something so simple and gives such a cool impact. Now imagine that we'd already painted the tips of these white, then this would indeed look like a cloud is passing through. And I can adjust the size of this particle system the same way that I can adjust anything else. I can even adjust the shape and change it from being a box like so to look more like a hemisphere like so. And it really does suit your needs for depending on what you want to do. Maybe you wanted to make it look like a red colour, and that will give the impression of, for example, fire going through the actual, if I bring this back down to earth for a second, it could look like fire going through the trees and actually kind of creating a burn, smoky effect, like so. Or you could use a smaller version and use it as something like a flare inside an actual environment, where you could then create a plane that appears over the top. And that's just one of the prefabricated ones. I'll just delete that for a second. Here we go. Now, there are loads and loads and loads. One of my favourite ones is for the explosions. Where is the first person controller? There we are. I need to make sure that I'm looking in the right direction when I use this, you see. I'll just drag the explosion out and place it in front here and raise it slightly. And when I press play, we should see an explosion. Bang, there we go. Fantastic. So this is a cool little prefab that we can spawn later on in a game, for example, when something explodes. So if I just bring that a little bit closer to the character for a second, we should be able to see it a little bit better. Here we go, play again. Bang, and there we go, fantastic. You can also use it for things like fireworks or whatever you want. Now, what I want to do now is show you how you can create your very own custom particle system. And we're going to use this as an effect of like snow or rain. All I want you to do is right click, come down to effects and go to particle system. There we go. And that will create the default particle system. Now it's not looking how we want it to at the minute, and it's way too high in the sky. Let's bring it at least into view by shrinking it down. Well, not shrinking it down, bringing it down, sorry. There we go. I was trying to get it in front of the camera. So how close are we now? Pretty close. There we go. And let me just test it by switching to the game view. Yep, we can definitely see that particle system. So it's in the right area for what I want to do. Now, if I bring it up in the sky, above the character, and then I make this particle system a child of the first person controller, that means that when I move around, the particle system will always remain nested above us. So let's switch this around so it's facing downwards rather than upwards by just pulling on this rotation axis, like so. Now if I just press play for a second and I look up, there's the particle system. And if I move around, it actually follows us around. And that's a cool little effect to create as if, I mean, it doesn't look like snow at the minute, granted, but you can see how the nesting of the particle system remains above the character to create this kind of snowy effect. And that's so much easier on the power of the machine and the memory, rather than creating a particle system that's actually enormous to cover and engulf the entire terrain. It's just a small little hack that works so effectively. Now let's have a play with this. Let's slow this down slightly. So let's look at the start speed and change that to be a 1 or even a 2. There we go. Let's also increase the duration to be about 10 so that it actually falls further. I'm also going to change the shape to be more like a hemisphere. There we go. And let's have a look. The gravity modifier. Let's increase the amount of gravity to 0.3. And now look, you see it falls to the floor. So let's try 0.05. Still too fast. There we go, 0.2. Okay, let's scroll and increase the amount of particles on the emission. So let's make this throw out 100 at a time. And let's make the max particles about 300. Let's also make the speed, no, the start size a bit bigger. Or a little bit smaller even. There we go. And this is basically just a case of trial and error. You can mess around with the start position and the end position. And we can change the velocity over time, the force, the color over time, the size over the lifetime. And this is currently the default particle. Now, if I just make it so I'm happy with the size for a second, or the type, let's have a look for a sphere. And let's increase the size, like so. And then let's decrease the size of the particles and slow them down. So the size, let's bring you down to be a lot smaller. There we go. Now let's just increase the size, the time a little bit more. And bring it down slower. There we go. Now it's still going too fast, but you can see the idea of what I'm doing. I'm adjusting the size, the speed, and the rate of emission for the particle system, and that affects the viewable area. I mean, all I have to do really is just make it a lot bigger. There we go. And then if I decrease the amount that come out to about 20 and press play, we need to mess around with the gravity a little bit, but there we go. Look, so if the particles were a little bit smaller and I slowed it down just a tad more, then it would at least look like it's snowing slightly. Now, let's do that. Let's just decrease the speed and the start size. There we go. Let's have another look now. In fact, if I make it smaller, I actually need to bring it down into the viewable area a little bit more, like so. If I increase the gravity, they'll actually fall to the ground a little bit quicker as well. But there we go, look. Now, if you combine the two, you could use a dust storm cloud and create... Now, this does start to look a little bit more like snow now. But yeah, you could use a dust cloud and you could slow it down slightly and change the color to be white, and it would give the impression that you're kind of in a snowstorm. and then these individual particles that are flying around, which don't really suit a tropical palm tree environment, but you can see the point that I'm kind of making. It's a solid foundation for you to experiment on and play around with. Just don't go too crazy with the amount of particles that are actually generated, as once again, it affects the performance. So if it starts to lag a little bit, then you know to either remove some trees or to decrease the amount of particles. But what a cool little hack. Let's place a particle system above the camera, increase the gravity slightly, and just mess around a little bit with the settings until we get the kind of effect like this to make it snow. Now, if you wanted it to rain, then all you'd have to do is come down to the default particle here, and you could change this for a different particle material to basically reskin the particle itself. And then what I'd probably do is increase the gravity slightly to speed it up and make it fall faster. And that would look more like rain. So if we changed, I mean, just temporarily, I'll just change the colour to be like a blue colour. There we go. And I'm going to increase the size a little bit just so that we can see it. Not that much. It's still too big. There we go. So I've increased the gravity slightly to speed up the effect, and I changed the particle colour to be blue. Now if I increase the gravity more, then it will fall faster and get rid of the kind of floaty effect. If you were to switch the texture from the default particle to something that looks more like a raindrop, which a good trick, by the way, is if you simply create a line, a square in Photoshop with a white line drawn on it, and that will give kind of lines of rain coming down the screen. So that's all you'd have to do. All you'd have to do is swap the texture out, and you can play around with the particle system. Now let's combine the two for a second. Let's throw a dust storm in. And let's change the colour of the dust storm to be white, like so. I'm also going to increase the size and the size of the particles. There we go. And then let's see how this looks. Now, if I hadn't painted the ground with the grass texture and it was a snowy texture, then, and I'd used models that were snowy trees rather than the default trees by grabbing hold of a different one from the asset store, then this has got potential. This has got potential to start creating an environment. Now, let's imagine you were playing a game and you wanted to walk into rain or walk through some rain and then the rain stopped. Then all you'd have to do is not have the particle system nested as a child of the camera. So if I take this out for a second, like so, and I just move it over, I don't know, over here, then what will happen is we'll start and we won't be in this kind of rain effect. But if we start walking around, we'll suddenly walk into rain, look, as a particle system is over there. And that's how you can generate the effect of starting and stopping rain areas. And it's the same with the wind, with the hemisphere, rather than, oh, 1 second. I have to plug this in, guys. But yeah, this is exactly how that kind of effect is created. So there you go. So that's how you can add some kind of snow or rain effect. And if you're using the correct models and the correct colour scheme for the landscape, you can really create some powerful effects. So, hope you enjoyed that one. I'll see you in the next video.